Before I began sitting this evening, I was thinking, oh yes, I'm giving a Dhamma talk. Don't forget that protocol about asking the senior monk to speak on Dhamma. That'd be quite embarrassing to forget that. And that's how mindfulness is lost. So it's a good teaching. It's a good, helpful thing to just see, even with the reminder that we have to kind of do something that we know we should do, or the correct thing to do. It's just so easy to forget something. We can have such an easy kind of pathway with our intentions, but actually carrying them out is something quite different. And so it's one way, though, that we have in terms of something like that occurring is to think, oh, I'm so stupid, I'm not going to get it right. It's just going to be like this for the rest of my life. Might as well give up. Of course, that's one extreme reaction to making a mistake. And then, of course, the other is what can I do to prevent this in the future? And with that latter one, the emphasis is on learning. It's not about me. It's not about me and my problems and blaming myself and creating a negative sense of self around my experience. But it's more like how can I learn? The emphasis is on the interest that we can have and the result, the good, positive results we can have if we keep emphasizing this over and over again. And that was something that was akin to that. I was talking to Tan Tisaro and just about this, and he had in his previous life before becoming a monk, he was quite well versed in like health, in taking care of his body, and so he has a good amount of knowledge in that field. So I asked him about something that was occurring for me that I wasn't understanding with just some exercise, and he noticed right away that my focus wasn't on health but on accomplishment, and or on some number I was trying to create, and that's the same thing. It's that what are we focusing on? Is it trying to imagine ourselves as a perfect spiritual practitioner that doesn't get anything wrong, or is it how do I learn from so many of my experiences so that I'm ultimately realizing how not to suffer? It's something that's akin to that kind of questioning of what our goal is, what we're trying to do, or what our motivation is. Just counting on something, or is it for our health? And then we can see this as well with something like avoidance. And that's something that I think is a motivator for many of us. It's certainly a big motivator for myself, that sort of avoidance of any kind of pain or conflict or difficulty, avoidance of making a mistake, and on it goes. It's just like sort of that can be quite a strong motivation. And I have to admit, it can be very difficult to understand things through our experience of going through difficulty and kind of embracing that difficulty as something that can be a motivator for us, as something that we can say, oh good, this is a challenge for me, this is something I can take up and move forward with, rather than away from. So I've been contemplating that a lot, because I think it's very easy to fall into avoidance, and especially I think about just like habits, trying to develop good habits, and how difficult it is, because it's just so much easier to move with our what are our defilements, our sort of bases around like greed or aversion, delusion, or our kind of worry, our hindrances that we have, restlessness, and just being lazy or wanting to kind of just check out. And then we can, as of course, with like the fifth hindrance of doubt is just kind of bogging ourselves down with questioning whether any of this is really right or true or helpful. And we keep questioning until we can't stop that questioning machine. It just goes on and on. So the challenge, I think, is really seeing that this core teaching around the Buddha that there's the suffering that leads to the end of suffering, and that this process, what we're engaging in to gain kind of the highest pleasure that a human being can have, that of release from craving, release from dukkha, it comes with a fair amount of effort and difficulty. It's not an easy thing, although it can sometimes seem quite simple. It can still be extremely difficult. So a lot of the time, what we need to do is encourage ourselves and keep ourselves moving in the right direction. And this is something I've spoken about before. Just how do we really speak to ourselves? What are the ways that we encourage ourselves through our own internal dialogue, our own internal speech? Because it's not, as I was beginning, just saying like, oh, that was so stupid of me, and why do I keep doing these things? And it's really how we use wholesome speech within ourselves to motivate ourselves. And in certain ways, this can be something that can come through like strength, some kind of strong words that we say to ourselves. So I was thinking about something that I've particularly done that's been quite successful for me, and it was just a technique that I used, and it's a little personal, but I thought I'd share it, and it's around actually sexuality and how to work with sexuality in a particular way. And so one of the things that we do as monastics in a monastery, or anybody really who's following the 8 precepts, we're giving up an intentness towards sexual activity, sexual thinking, sexual feelings, and so we're really trying to abandon these and not indulge in them. And so this is not necessarily an easy thing to work with, and it takes a while. In fact, I've heard some say that the primary reason that a monk disrobes that's given is that this hasn't been given up. This intentness towards sexuality. And so for myself, I developed this about 2.5 years ago, and once I started it didn't stop, and I found it so helpful in my practice. And it just doesn't extend towards sexuality. It can be any kind of inclination one has that is unwholesome in the mind, that one sees as not helping one in terms of our spiritual life. And again, this isn't for everybody, because in taking the 5 precepts, for example, sexuality is not abandoned, but one is still responsible with it. One does not abuse others with that intentness around sexuality. So in terms of relinquishment, however, this could be used in either context. It doesn't have to be only in the context of the 8 precepts or completely giving sexuality up. But what I did was it was a way of how I spoke to myself. So if there was any kind of thought that arose, for many years I just didn't, I kind of worked with it in different ways. I would work with it with what we call sometimes a subha practice, so like trying to use it, quell that kind of interest by more focusing on the unbeautiful elements of the body. For the practice I found, and what was recommended, is focusing on our own bodies. And this is just more looking at the reality of what a body is. If we open it up, it's not something that is attractive. The what sometimes people say is, my body is my temple, and they talk about the beauty of the body. And yeah, I think just that's maybe in terms of health and wanting to take care of our bodies, that makes sense. But in terms of like, if we just open our bodies up, there's certain smells that we would be not very beautiful for us to experience. Or if I like to use the metaphor, if somebody was just handed you your stomach and you were holding it in your hands and it was oozing all over, I think your thoughts about your body being a temple would probably evaporate, because it wouldn't kind of feel very pleasant, and it would kind of be smelly and dripping all over you, and on it goes. So that's one practice, and it's helpful for some. Other people, they might not appreciate it. And I found it very helpful, but in terms of just the mind, how quick it is and how quick it can come up with just a thought, and then it enters the mind, and then we need to usually do something with that if we want to keep ourselves in a wholesome state. And so in terms of just directly talking about relinquishing sexuality, I just started to use a technique where I just talked to myself very directly, and I said, "No, you need to drop that right now." And at first, I started to notice that over many years, that wasn't completely bought into very easily, or not bought into, but it wasn't taken in so easily. And so I started using that firmness, and it was just so helpful to me, because over weeks and months, I could see that this inclination of what to do when, I'm just being direct, talking about this, a sexual thought would arise, and my intentness was to relinquish that, to let go of that, was the strength of that conviction. It allowed the mind to kind of relax in a state of just letting it go, just letting go in a very short period of time, a few seconds, and eventually it became a point where if I wasn't able to prevent it, this is what right effort is called, we prevent unwholesome states from arising immediately, then I was able to prevent it within a very short period of time. And I'm sharing this because it doesn't necessarily just need to be in the realm of sexuality. It can be any kind of defilement that we have, any habit that we have that we can use in this way. And essentially what I did was I really fought. I fought very hard with my mind. There is one of the ways that the Buddha teaches this, he talks about the quelling of thought, and that one of the ways one does something like that when thought is overtaking our mind and we feel we don't have control of our own minds, we don't have a sense of an ability to stop the arising and continuance of that unwholesome state, the unwholesome thinking that's arising, is it's sort of the last step, and it's quite drastic, but it's very much akin to what I'm describing here. And he just says you put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and you crush it. You crush that unwholesome state. And so very similarly, I wouldn't normally recommend this because we tend to kind of think about like a softer approach. But because I've had so much success with this, and the reason I'm bringing it up is to divert a little bit into what Ajahn Cunda had brought up was these like checkmark sheets that we have. And I don't really have a checkmark sheet, but I do have a way that I kind of check things off each day. And there's a real wholesome pride in just knowing that this is done every day. And so I just want to, I'm bringing this up just as an encouragement for people to experiment with it, to experiment with a way that you can learn to quell a habit in your mind that might not be very helpful for you, and that the attention to something in a very strong way and the successful way of speaking to yourself about it can be so helpful that it can actually diminish this quality in the mind to such a degree that you feel very confident. And what that is describing is more what Ajahn Jayasara was teaching about when he was talking about faith, and that our faith is not around belief. So I don't have to believe that there's that this can work. I don't have to believe in this as something that's helped me. I don't have to believe in it as something that I see that has a potential for creating more peace in my mind and less agitation. I have faith in it as meaning that I have confidence in it because it works and I've seen it work. And I think that if I had avoided doing something like this just because of the difficulty of it, or obviously there's something very strongly involved in not getting what one wants. Or there's something that's being really cut in doing this. The unpleasantness of that, it really like drops away so significantly because of the positive results that arise. And so this is really, talking directly about something that has to do with the suffering that leads to the end of suffering, right? So there was like at first a lot of suffering, and then a smaller and smaller amount of suffering until there was much less suffering that led to a greater peace, a greater sense of contentment, and less contention with this energy or this intention towards sexuality. And that doesn't mean that there isn't any defilement in this area, or that I think about it as also like a tube of toothpaste that one's like put a bunch of pinholes in. So there might be success in this area, but you squeeze that toothpaste and desire finds its way in another way. So then the trick with all of that is then actually trying to be aware that, okay, if one is dealing with desire in one way, it's going to find its way in another, or it might be expressed in some sort of aversion. And so this is really an important thing that one can try to work with. But even just getting over that sort of avoidance and finding success in one thing, one also needs to have that intentness towards the whole, the whole approach to the path. And so I think what another element around this is that just because there is success in one area, we need to really be able to see all of the other areas in our lives that we might not have those same successes with, and then really apply that same intention, possibly not in the same way that I'm talking about, but towards these other things. And then the opposite thing that can occur with all of this is what I would say is something like called the saboteur. So how often it is that instead of moving ourselves towards something that's quite helpful towards us, we find ways that we discourage that movement. We sort of find ways to encourage the unwholesome. So the Buddha gives a very good explanation with that. I'm not going to get the sutta down exactly correctly, but he's talking about like he's using a monk coming back from a journey and then saying to himself, well, I've been on a long journey. I don't want to really exert myself. I'm not going to, let's use the word meditation. I'm not going to meditate now because I've been on a long journey, and that could kind of make me more tired. So, I'm just going to do something else or distract myself. Or he might think, well, I actually do have energy to exert myself and to practice, but that might make me more tired later. And so I don't want to do that. And so there's that tendency we can have towards being a saboteur for ourselves. And I think all of us, I would guess, can identify those in our lives, those particular ways where we have certain habits that we know are not beneficial for us, but we go ahead with anyway, because we do the opposite of what I was talking about, and we talk ourselves out of the wholesome and into the unwholesome. And it's very important for us to kind of rise up and be able to kind of talk to ourselves clearly and understand what those things are. We follow them because even though they might be, they're sort of the pleasures that lead towards ultimately more dukkha. But because there's some pleasure there, then we move in that direction. That's our motivation is, well, I can get a little bit of pleasure out of this. And if I have to exert myself, I'm going to have a little bit of pain, and I don't want to have that small amount of pain. So, like the obvious thing now in our current culture is just addiction to screens, and how easy it is to just buy into looking at screens or needing to be around them or checking something here or there. This is a very strong addiction for us. And so we get a little bit of pleasure out of that each time we do something. We check to see if somebody's sent something to us or whatever it might be, or some video or there's so many things on the internet. And I think most people, to a certain extent, know that it's destroying their lives. It's destroying their attention. It's destroying their ability to be with other people, to attend to other people, to attend to themselves. But yet, because there is pleasure involved, it's the easy way out. And so this is really how the saboteur works. And the saboteur is not our friend. It is definitely our enemy. It's that part of ourself that we really do need to speak sharply to and prevent from causing so much trouble in our lives. In the Buddhist canon, it's personified as a being called Mara. Many of us have heard about Mara, and Mara he actually is an incarnate, so he keeps going through many lifetimes. So even the Buddhas, I can't remember if it was Sariputta or Mahamoggallana who had lived as Mara many lifetimes, and yet he was, this is one of the great sort of saints. And so Mara is not a permanent character, so he actually can be redeemed in a certain way. But his intention through his life is to meddle and cause problems. And so we all have our own personal Mara. We carry him around, but we don't, we do have power over Mara. We do have power over this saboteur. And so it's just very important to try to find these pathways that we can look into our own minds and see where it is that we're not rising up, that we're not doing those things that are beneficial for us. So like for me, one of the things that's been helpful is just looking at certain habits, especially more recently. There were several that were pointed out to me that were causing harm, and so I needed to really look at those. And for a while, what came up was this sort of avoidance, because there was pain there, right? There's pain when we are given feedback about ourselves that isn't like, you're the greatest human being that ever lived. That's not so painful. But if one is told the opposite, or in certain ways there's some deficiencies, then that's not something easy to hear. And the problem is getting caught up in that aspect, like, well, because it's so easy to avoid. Then it's like, well, it wasn't said to me in the right way, or it was, what about this other person and their problems, and whatever it is. This is the saboteur coming up. I don't really need to look at these because it wasn't said in good faith, or whatever it might be. We do need to get beyond that, and then try to see whether this is something that's true. Whether it's something that if we followed or did the opposite from, or we improved our habit in that way, is it something that would help us? And so that's extremely important for us to look at. And sometimes, unfortunately, we're not given that gift. Sometimes we have friends or family who aren't willing to say things to us, and then we have to find these things out ourselves. And so it's important to really try to look, but then to open up to these things rather than move into avoidance. So I was emphasizing the fact that if we really look to our practice as a source of learning, and that's our motivation, just how can I learn from this? And we just keep saying that over and over to ourselves. How can I learn from this? How can I understand myself better? How can I relinquish the things that are causing me problems? How can I relinquish the things that I am causing myself problems with? That's really the healthiest way we can really speak to ourselves and understand our own experience. And so just to encourage everyone to try to really bring these up in the mind, to try to use as many ways as possible to gain clarity around these mistakes around our own intentions, where we might be deceiving ourselves that these intentions are really helpful or they're pleasurable, but ultimately they're not beneficial for us. And so for us to really look at them, and then to learn what is the best way that we can really educate ourselves, to help ourselves learn how to really take on that understanding that there's got to be a little bit of pain in order for there to be an ultimate pleasure. And if we can work with that mind that's giving into the sort of saboteur and rise above that, it's so incredibly beneficial for us. But for each of us, it's really our own doing, it's our own path. It's what we have to do for ourselves. We can't expect anybody else to do it for us. And so it's not easy work. It often takes a good amount of effort and especially motivation. And over many years, that can be difficult. It can be difficult to keep that motivation up. So we do gain from living with others who have the same values that we have in this dimension. And then we just keep trying to move ourselves in the right direction and try to be honest with ourselves. So that very honesty and seeing very clearly helps us in so many ways. Anyway, these are just some thoughts for tonight. We have an early, well, it's not so early, but for some of us, we're going to have a bit of a different schedule tomorrow morning. So I thought I'd end this now, and anything that's been beneficial for you, please contemplate and use it. And anything that hasn't, just feel free to leave it behind. You won't.